I was kidnapped from jail by the General Intelligence Service, who took me, they threw me, handcuffed me, blindfolded me, put me in a car, and a car drove for a couple of hours, then threw me to another car that took me to one of their places, roughed me up for like 4 hours, and then threw me in a dungeon underground with no lights and windows and kept me there. So yeah, at that point maybe I started thinking that they might want to kill me, not release me. I'm an old activist. I've been an activist for a very long time and been arrested before, but for very short periods. So yes, mentally I think I was mentally prepared, but no, and nothing prepares you for what you see. And not only about you, but of what you see to others and the miseries they go through and the torture marks on their body or on their souls. It's very disturbing but enriching experience. 2.5 years in prison with 2 forced disappearances, one at the beginning, one at the end, and then deportation outside the country have impacted my life tremendously. It had a very powerful effect on me, on my family, on my well-being, on my stability, on my finances, emotionally, in every way. No, previous times, were either hours or a day. That was the maximum I stayed, and it was a short period. Annoying, but I got used to this kind of harassment for 30 years. They started harassing me from 89, 90, so I kind of got used to that. So yes, always been harassed in many ways, but never reached this level of brutality in taking you and throwing you in jail indefinitely and without a cause, without a reason, without even an interrogation. I mean, for me, it's I know that the public prosecutor's interrogations are usually false and that's his ready-made accusations, but usually you get to know from the interrogation in your forced disappearance or with officers what really bothered them or what is the real issue that they are getting you for, not knowing where will that end, if it's going to end, are you going to survive it, what's happening with your family at the moment. There's many existential issues that comes to your mind when the time goes on and you're living in this dark cell looking at a wall. Very different than your short term. Your short term, you know, this is a quick harassment that it's going to be over soon, but this the main difference is you have no idea. This can go on and on endlessly. So part of you had to fight them. Part of you had to keep insane, keep physically right. But part of you think that you need to adjust for a long-term stay in that, which is difficult, which is very difficult. The campaign, in many ways, gave me security. Definitely, I was less tortured and abused because there was a campaign and because my name was known, and that made them careful not to abuse me. Especially in my case, I was lucky. From the first time I appeared and I saw my lawyer, I told him that I want this fully public and I wanted a full political fight. I'm not hiding away, I want to fight them. I knew I have a very loving wife who's gonna fight for me. I knew I have a supportive family, and I knew I have friends a lot that gonna be supportive, and of course that I'm privileged with that, because a lot of people, part of their suffering is losing their family support or their social support. So yes, the campaign helped me both ways, inside jail and outside it, but also gave me a sense of serenity. The sentiment was very clear. People were supportive, were encouraging, and were telling you we're not gonna forget you. And that's very important for me and for a prisoner, a political prisoner, to know that he's not forgotten. And this whole tactic of throwing you away in a dark place does not mean you're away from people's thoughts. That gives you courage and security, and eventually led to my release. So I definitely support that a lot for other prisoners. Absolutely not. I mean, it's a false claim, political positioning that only has to do with acquiring some legitimacy around the world, maybe getting some money from IMF and others because he've ruined the economy and in a very bad economic shape. But in reality, this last 8 months, even since the so-called human rights strategy going through the political dialogue, he may have released some 650 prisoners who should have been released. But on the meantime, he arrested some 1,054. Actually, the number of prisoners have increased. We've had somewhere between 32 to 36 deaths in jail because of medical negligence, because of torture, because of bad treatment. We've had 156 incidents of collective punishment for inmates, including beatings. We've had worsening jail conditions for people on the country. I mean, and the whole fear tactics are still going on against parties, against activists. Everybody who even have been released are still being threatened not to speak, threatened not to move, and not being able to go back to their jobs or their universities, to the extent that some of them are being told by officers that we're picking you up after COP. So no, nothing have changed. This is just political positioning. This criminal regime is not changing and thrives on oppression and thrives on fear tactics with no change, and only cares about the picture, about the show of it. We had a very small ground where we had our 1 hour walk break during the day. That was a very tiny place. We used to be crammed in it one way or another. But just next to our annex, we had huge grounds, grassed, beautiful, with a big mosque and big bathrooms. We actually were never once allowed to go to that place. This was only there for NGOs and international visitors to come and take a picture and talk about human rights. In reality, that doesn't exist. It's a show, it's a picture, but in reality, the numbers are increasing and terror tactics are continuing. For me, it is difficult to name one person even to support some certain individual campaigns, other than individual campaigns are important to show the human face. But there's thousands of people that all has to go home, and every one of them is a human being with a family, with sorrows, and a lot of them are unknown, and a lot of them have done nothing to deserve being there. To be honest, I have lots of friends. I have lots of friends that I knew for a long time and before jail, like Ala Abdel Fattah, like Ziad Al-Alemi, like Mohammed Al-Assas, like Baqir, like Men'em Al-Futuh. But I also have acquired hundreds of friends while being there, and most of them were arbitrarily detained. None of them have committed a crime worth being arrested for. All of them are there because of the political discourse and because of their opposition to the regime, and that's a crime that must end. In my case, they have been negotiating with me, not negotiating. I mean, for me, that it is very similar to the political dialogue that goes on there. They had a dialogue with me while handcuffed and blindfolded. I don't know if you consider that a dialogue, but this is very similar to the political dialogue they have with politicians these days in Cairo under a barrel of a gun. So yes, I knew how things were going, so I knew that the day of my release is getting closer with that development, and I knew that the pressure they were onto because of my wife and my family and my friends' support and campaign. I was maybe surprised because my last period became much worse. They were trying to make it even harder on me, and then by the end of it, I was kidnapped from jail by the General Intelligence Service, who took me. They threw me, handcuffed me, blindfolded me, put me in a car, drove for a couple of hours, then threw me to another car that took me to one of their places, roughed me up for like 4 hours, and then threw me in a dungeon underground with no lights and windows and kept me there. So yeah, at that point maybe I started thinking that they might want to kill me, not release me, and I was wondering why they're using those tactics if they actually want to release me. But yeah, clearly that a scaring tactic for the last minutes before they took me from there to a plane departing Cairo. Without my clothes, without my family, without my goodbyes, without any of the things they supposedly said that they're gonna do. But we are used to their lyings and their deception, and they're unable to do a deal they made. The minute I landed in Paris and saw my wife and held her for the first time, and came out and saw the sun and saw hundreds of supporters and lots of media, I realized I'm free. And I took a breath and started fighting for the friends I left behind. But the actual feeling of freedom is a long process. I mean, being in jail makes you lose a lot of things, lose touch technology, lose touch with time. That took a while for me to recapture and readjust. Wiping out this memory every day, thinking back of jail, thinking of the wall that I have been looking at for 2.5 years, thinking of the people that I left behind me, the thought that I know in state security parameters every day from 9 p.m. till 5 a.m. there's a torture party. And so yeah, it took me a while that every day at 9 p.m. I start have this shiver in my body that somebody is waiting for his torture roll. It takes time to adjust, but with people love, with people support, and with determination to fight back, that makes me go by.